Okay, we're going to be talking about corruption in the courts today. This is number three of a series of so-called so far four. Man, I can't believe that. Anyways, and there's also corruption in the court four coming out that I'm working on, and this is supplemented by a peace officer's video, and as well as um, a Canada Border Pigs video that are directly related to this. I'm also some upcoming videos are going to be mentioned at the end. Um, let's get going here. Recently, I was subjected to assault, kidnapping, and false imprisonment by the Canada Border Pigs and forced to go through one of their kangaroo courts with their show trial because I had the audacity to think I had some rights, and I'd filed a petition of right against the pigs in 2010, and Langston, the judicial whore, dismissed it because he intended to precipitate all of this. I had filed a notice of appeal, but the whore in the case, his name was Redmond, had ordered a probation and a shrink because I had the audacity to think I had any rights. And after my sister-in-law told me how Shrink had told her that if my brother in another case did not consent to get a license, that the shrink was going to declare my brother insane. And I realized they were not interested in justice. I will never see anything just come from the hands of these criminals. Um, and this is an attempt to expose these criminals for who they are. So I left the country, quite frankly. I have no intention of going back, and I am going to smear them with YouTube videos all over the place. And expose them for who they are. Um, all of the material provided in these videos was submitted in writing to their kangaroo court, which is further proof that it was prejudged from the beginning and it didn't matter what I said or did. This video is in addition, like I mentioned before, to another video called Peace Officers that's already been uploaded, and another upcoming video called Canada Border Pigs, and another upcoming video called Corruption in the Courts, number 4. Um, I intend to show in this video that Redmond was not a judge, but was in fact impersonating a judge. Redmond was a clerk for the Canada Border Services Agency. Redmond prejudged the case. The case was a foregone conclusion. Before I even got to the border, it was prejudged. Redmond's a foreign agent of the Vatican. Redmond represented me without authority. Redmond's so-called court is the United Nations court. Redmond's so-called and his United Nations court are de facto. I further intend to show that the Canada Border Services Agency pigs are de facto, and Redmond's judgment is a void judgment and a fraud and a nullity. Redmond perjured his oath. I intend to show Redmond perjured his oath. He breached the trust, and related to this case, because of how this J.D. Rook had smeared me in some other cases. I'm talking about him too. So J.D. Rook, who was Associate Chief Judge of the Alberta um, Court of Queen's Bench, or so-called Court of Queen's Bench, represented me without authority, perjured his oath, breached the trust, and neither Redmond nor Rook or any of these pigs have a lawful, valid, current oath. They're all just a bunch of thieves. And that's where we need to define what PIG is. PIG is an acronym. It stands for Persons in Government Who Intend to Breach the Trust and Perjure their Oath. Not everybody that works for the government's a pig, obviously. We have a lot of really good people that work for the government that really take it seriously and that want to do the right thing. And that's all the more reason why we need to expose these pigs. To start it all off, Redmond was impersonating a judge, and this is a court citation. It's a U.S. court citation. I haven't found Canadian equivalents, but these are basic principles of law. Okay, and so I have found a lot of these court cases. I have found Canadian comparable ones, but Canada doesn't have that many court cases. There's only 20 million people in Canada, and so whereas in the U.S. there's 350 million, and so there's a lot more court cases in the U.S. to pick from. But they're basic principles of law, and where I've been able to find the Canadian equivalents, or England, I've used them and showed them, because this is really going on in America too, and in most countries around the world, I think, although I can't say from first-hand experience. Um, anyways, when acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of a municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. Courts administrating and enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely act as an extension, as an agent for the involved agency, but only in a ministerial and not in a discretionary capacity. Okay, so gee, that sounds like it's a kangaroo court. It was prejudged. They're just a hired thug for the administrative agency. So these pigs put a bunch of hired thugs at the border so they can assault people and kidnap people, and then hold a show trial and justify their assaults, kidnappings, and false imprisonments. Um, a summary proceeding. That case that I had, it was a summary trial, or so-called trial. Any proceeding by which a controversy is settled, case disposed of, or trial conducted in a prompt and simple manner without the aid of a jury, without presentment or indictment, or in other respects out of the regular course of common law. In other words, they had no intention of providing any common law remedies for me. They're just nothing but a bunch of thieves. And this is Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. A summary proceeding, and then if you look there, the underlined part, it's also termed a summary trial. It's a plenary action, and the common law was wholly a stranger to summary proceedings. That's Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. A plenary jurisdiction's a military jurisdiction. Plenary jurisdiction's a court's full and absolute power over the subject matter and the parties in the case. Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. A summary proceeding is another name for a star chamber that was abolished in England, although I'm sure they just changed the name and they do it as something else nowadays. But anyways, the corrupt star chamber courts in England required defendants to have counsel. Star chamber stood for swiftness and arbitrary power. Well, think about it. Arbitrary, gee, that sounds like Admiralty maritime law or military dictatorship. It was a limitation on common law. Are we surprised? It's martial law. Has nothing to do with common law. It basically, eliminates under martial law. There is no common law. Redmond was enforcing a statute. When acting to enforce a statute and its subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of a municipal court is acting as an administrative officer and not in a judicial capacity. Courts administering and enforcing statutes do not act judicially but merely ministerially. It's a kangaroo court. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such power are necessary nullities. So there's no way. He was an imposter. He was masquerading as a judge. If you read in the Canadian, all courts in Canada are actually federal. I don't care what they want to call it, because there's federal statutes that regulate the courts. And I don't have it here, but it's going to be in my Canada Border Pigs presentation, where it shows that the Judges Act in Canada only says that courts, judges of superior courts, have to have some training in the law, and provincial court's an inferior court of limited jurisdiction. We go through that in the Canada Border Pigs presentation or video. Keep on moving. Judges who become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, and otherwise act as mere clerks of the involved agency. It's a kangaroo court. The guy was a clerk. He was not a judge. He doesn't have immunity. He was just some clerk is all he was. Is no different than, why don't we get some truck driver over here. Matter of fact, that's what I was in my paperwork. I said he's probably, not that I have anything against truck drivers, but they need to have someone that's qualified in the law to be able to make a decision, and in a way, that's a joke too, because it'd just be more of a kangaroo court, quite frankly. Really, and this is one of the things that I'm going to be doing and talking about towards the end of this video, is that we need to start doing our duty to hold our own courts and they need to provide actually our own courts. That they haven't been providing our true de jure courts, and they should be. And a true common law court is a jury of our peers, and the absolute best that they can provide is the appearance of justice, which is a fraud, and that's actually covered in Corruption in the Courts, number 4. But I go through that quite extensively. The absolute best that they can provide is the appearance of justice, which is a fraud. Everything they do is a fraud, and we need to have be able to convene a true common law jury and have real justice. And these people aren't providing justice. It's a kangaroo court. It was a kangaroo court from the beginning. From the beginning, it has nothing to do with justice and everything to do with a commercial transaction and making money for their UN handlers. And we're going to go into that too. Anyways, a judge ceases to sit as a judicial officer because the governing principles of administrative law provides that courts are prohibited from substituting their evidence, testimony, record, arguments, or rationale for that of the agency. Additionally, courts are prohibited from substituting their judgments for that of the agency. Okay, so they don't, it's a kangaroo court. It was prejudged from the beginning. They're not interested in justice. It is an accepted rule that not only in state courts but in federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes. As a ministerial clerk for an agency, that's it. They're just a clerk. Redmond was an imposter and putting on a charade in his kangaroo court to complete his quasi-contract. Imposters, religious, those who falsely pretend to extraordinary commission from heaven or terrify and abuse people with false denunciations of judgments. That's Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 1. And this has been going on for hundreds of years. And all of these judges, they're all foreign agents of the Vatican. I've got a presentation. There's some videos that I've already uploaded that talk about how judges are all foreign agents of the Vatican, and it's really a satanic religious ceremony. There's a guy on YouTube called I go through it here later, but his name is Servant King, and he provides YouTube videos, a whole bunch of them. There's probably, I don't know, there's dozens. Anyways, that go through and explain how these court cases are satanic religious ceremonies. These guys are priests of Baal. They wear a military uniform. Don't get me going, and I wonder how that's all going to look on Judgment Day when we're standing before God on Judgment Day and having to answer for how we treated other people, and we're letting this kind of stuff go on. Redmond was impersonating a judge. Another imposter citation from Williams' Law Dictionary, 1816. Those who falsely pretend an extraordinary commission from heaven or terrify and abuse people with false denunciations of judgments. Bernay-New Law Dictionary, 1792. Impostors in religion are such as falsely pretend an extraordinary commission from heaven or terrify and abuse people with false denunciations of judgments. All persons, it goes on, all persons who pretend to use any kind of witchcraft, forgery, sorcery, enchantment, or conjuration, or undertake to tell fortunes, or pretend from their skill in the occult sciences to find out goods that have been stolen shall be imprisoned, basically. Another one for imposter, Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. One who pretends to be someone else to deceive others, especially to receive the benefits of a negotiable instrument. Well, how do you think they're getting paid? You know, it's all negotiable instruments. They can't even accept anything else. That's more evidence that they're de facto, that they're a UN court. Revolutions have been fought over taxation without representation, and that's what was going on. He was representing me without authority. It was all over the news. I fired his butt and walked out of court, and out of his so-called court, and I said, if you think you're representing me, you're fired, and then walked out. And so anyways, the U.S. War of Independence, English Civil War with Oliver Cromwell, a glorious revolution, the Magna Carta. There's a section in the Magna Carta says that no bailiff will put his law to you without producing witnesses. And so, hello, what do you think that is? They're representing you. They're putting their law to you. That's exactly what it is. They're saying that you're one of their slaves. And that's in the Magna Carta. This is actually a Canadian court case. Revolutions have been fought over taxation without representation. The U.S., if you go to the District of Columbia right now, you'll see in their plates, it says no taxation without representation. And that was supposed to have been some slogan that happened in the War of Independence. And there's all sorts of the stuff that went along around that. We're going to talk about it here. This is a U.S. Supreme Court case. If it were true that according to the spirit of our Constitution, the power of taxation must be limited by the right of representation, whence is derived the right to lay and collect taxes within this district. Okay, this is actually talking about it within the district, but it doesn't matter. If the principles of liberty of our Constitution forbid the raising of revenue from those who are not represented, do not the principles forbid the raising of duties, imposts, excises, as well as by direct tax? So there's no taxation without representation. That's Longborough versus Blake, 1820. Another Canadian case. This principle of no taxation without representation is central to our conception of democracy and the rule of law. And that's actually Supreme Court of Canada. So now they forcibly represent you, whether you like it or not. This is how the CRA thieves justify their thefts. This is how the IRS thieves justify their thefts. This is how the customs thieves justify their thefts, assaults, kidnappings, false imprisonments. Then they drag you into their kangaroo court and hold a show trial and to justify it. That's exactly what it is. That's the only purpose of all of that, is to say, hey, we were right. This guy's a criminal, and that's exactly what they're doing. And I had fired them all numerous times. I had served them with stuff. Some of it got refused, but that's just proof that they intended to represent me without authority. And that's exactly what was going on. They make a legal determination for you. Think about it. They cannot make a legal determination for you without representing you. They say, oh, here's a taxpayer. Let's go get some money. And so that's exactly what it is. This is the same kind of thing that went on with Patrick Henry. When Patrick Henry coined that phrase, give me liberty or give me death, what happened is he witnessed some guy get flogged to death for refusing to take a license. Well, think about it. They were representing him. They were saying, well, you need to get a license. And he says, no, I don't. And so they flogged him to death. They represented him. They accused him of being someone that's supposed to have a license. And then because he didn't take it, they flogged him to death. This is the kind of stuff these criminals do. And so obviously they want another revolution. It's impossible for anyone to make a legal determination for you without representing you. Any bureaucrat who makes a legal determination for you and thereby represents you after you have fired them has breached the trust and perjured their oath. Okay, that's a deliberate breach of the trust, and they perjured their oath. And I've got all sorts of evidence that I served them with these documents that say if you think you're representing me, you're fired. Every document I have has that in there, and has had it in there for almost 10 years since I started doing this. And so they can't claim deniability. And Rook is one of the biggest ringleaders. But Elizabeth the bitch, if you excuse my terminology for anyone out there that's sensitive, that a bitch is just a female dog. But also, no disrespect to dogs. If a dog is your friend, they let you know they're your friend. And if they're your enemy, they don't smile and tell you they're your friend and then stick a knife in your back. So that's certainly no disrespect to dogs. But she's a bitch, and it ain't over. Matter of fact, she's going to kick off pretty soon, so she's going to get to meet her maker, and I'm looking forward to that, let me tell you. I served Matchett, the chief judge, LeGrandeur, the associate chief judge, Redmond, with a notice and demand in which I fired him. The second paragraph in the second sentence, actually, in the document says, if you think you're representing me, you're fired. But they intend to represent me without authority because they intend to get one of their quasi contracts to justify their border pig buddies and continue with their vendetta against me because I had the audacity to think I had some rights. I filed a petition of right against these pigs as case number 1006-00907 in the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench, or so-called Court of Queen's Bench, all of which is evidenced in the upcoming Canada Border Pigs video. You know, I'll have images of many documents. I don't, there's some of the documents that basically and I'll explain it in there, some of the stuff is repetitive, and so I you know, to keep it short, I mean, the thing is like 250 slides already, and so it's going to be a long one. So anyways, I'm trying to thin it down, and I've eliminated some of the stuff that's basically repetitive, and I'm sure that you know, you don't want to see this stuff, but I guarantee you it's going to be in the criminal complaints. Some of it's already in criminal complaints that are recorded with the counter recorder. Anyways, what they're doing is they're selling their justice. In Chapter 40, the Magna Carta says, "To none will we sell, to no one refuse or delay right or justice." These so-called judges are selling their justice. They're refusing it if you don't pay their fee because they intend to nullify their oath of office and convert the case into a commercial transaction. That's exactly what's going on. When you pay that filing fee, then you just, that's a contract. Think about it. You pay the filing fee, then that's a contract, and you just turn that oath of office into a commercial transaction. You paid his errors and omissions insurance. That's part of the filing fee. There's stuff there's court cases and things that talk about it, that when you pay the filing fee, that pays their errors and omissions insurance. So now they couldn't care less what the outcome of that case is. You know, in the old days, they used to hang judges on a regular basis. So I'd say the judges back then wanted to make sure they had it correct. But nowadays, they have immunity, and now they have insurance. So who cares? I can sit there and do whatever I want when I'm in there, and some of them will even tell you that. These so-called judges intend to convert a right into a privilege. That's exactly what they do when they're selling their justice. And we're going to go into that. These so-called judges intend to represent you without authority, to fabricate evidence to justify their thefts and assaults and kidnappings, to justify their denials of due process, to justify the murders of their hired thugs by their hired thugs who were not operating in their official capacity as peace officers, as described in the video on peace officers. So what I'm essentially saying here is that when they see, a corporation doesn't have any rights, okay? So if they can convert you into a corporation, then they can go ahead and steal stuff from you. They can assault you. They can kidnap you. Corporations don't have any rights, and it's only people that have rights. And so the only rights that corporations, I shouldn't say that completely, the only rights that corporations have is rights that are granted by the legislature or parliament or Congress. So there's rights that are granted, but that's it. There's no absolute rights. Let me put it that way. There's no absolute rights. And so when they fabricate evidence that you're a corporation, then all of a sudden, oh, well, then what we did was perfectly appropriate. And so that's exactly what they're doing, is they're busy trying to fabricate evidence so they can justify their assaults and kidnappings and denials of due process. Due process for corporations different than it is for a living soul. You know, there's all sorts of stuff like that going on. And so that's exactly what they're doing. Anyways, what they do is they want to get you into one of their quasi contracts, and that's for corporations again, and that's more evidence that that's what they're doing. A quasi-contract, this is in Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition, and a quasi-contract is, this is the definition for a sumpsit, actually. But, and it talks about it here. A sumpsit is based at first only upon an express promise, and afterwards supported by an implied promise, and even upon a fictitious promise, okay? So, so this is how these bar members, these lawyers, justify this stuff, and it goes on. And competed with equity in the case of essentially equitable quasi contracts, and so it's growing out of the principle of unjust enrichment, and so they're even talking about quasi contracts in here. A quasi contract, both in Roman and English law, there are certain obligations which were not in truth contractual, but which in law treats as if they were. They were contractual in law, but not in fact, being the subject matter of fictitious extension of the sphere of contract to cover obligations which do not in reality fall within it. And that's Salmon on jurisprudence, and that's an English publication, 1937. Quasi-constructive or quasi-contracts are based solely upon the legal fiction or fiction of law. In other words, they can only do it for a fictitious entity. They cannot get a living soul into a quasi-contract, and they're busy back there trying to justify their quasi-contracts so they can get their royalty and make some money, and it's a well settled rule of law that he who seeks benefits of contract must also assume burdens. Voluntary acceptance of benefit or transaction is equivalent to consent of all obligations arising from it, as facts are known or ought to be known to person accepting. So what they're doing, think about it. They're converting your right into a privilege, and so then once it's a privilege, then they can sell it to you and impose one of these quasi contracts and say, oh, well, you were trying to get some benefit, some statutory benefit that only applies to fictitious entities, and so we're going to shove one of these quasi contracts down your throat. Quasi-contractual action presupposes acceptance and retention of a benefit by one party for full appreciation of the facts under circumstances making it inequitable for him to retain the benefit without the payment of the reasonable value. And so, and that's part of the reason why they put the governments into bankruptcy, because then equity bankruptcy is completely operates in equity, and so all of these courts operate in equity, and that's why we're going to talk about bankruptcy later. Quasi contracts are only done in their kangaroo court, where it's not a judge but a clerk impersonating a judge. Quasi contracts include obligations founded on statutory duties. Remember, whoever's doing a court case over a statutory issue is not a judge; he's a clerk, and that's what I'm saying there. We already covered that. So the so-called judge in there is actually impersonating a judge. He's actually a clerk, and so this has been going on from the beginning of time. Representing without authority, shoving their quasi contracts down our throat. The war, the Magna Carta was fought over that. The Glorious Revolution in England, the War of Independence, and now I guess they want another one. And this the U.S. Declaration of Independence talks about it. It says these truths are self-evident, in other words, obvious, that all men are created equal, are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, which is exactly what's going on, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under utter despotism or absolute despotism. That's a military dictatorship. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, and that means throw it off. So then and then it goes on. The history of the present United States Inc. This is actually something that I kind of added in there. Is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having the direct object of establishment of an absolute tyranny. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to the absolute world. So I actually only added in this the history of the present United States Inc. And the rest of it is actually in the original Declaration of Independence. Anyways, the Declaration of Independence is basically a list of grievances. And so then after all of that, it goes into because the king did this, because the king did that. Well, one of those grievances is for imposing taxes on us without our consent. Okay, and so again, there's no taxation without representation, and they actually figured that out. King George actually figured it out because they passed a statute in England. So the Declaration of Independence was in 1776. 2 years later, they passed the statute, and it says, and you know that they don't just pass these things overnight, especially in those days. They had to put it together and figure out the wording and all sorts of stuff. It probably took them 2 years just to do that. They were putting this stuff together. This is George III, Chapter 12, 1778, which is basically how you look up imperial statutes by chapter. Anyways, whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising a revenue in His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders, that from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, or assessment whatever payable in any of the colonies, provinces, or plantations in North America, except only such duties as may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. Well, no joke, Batman. To occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no joke, Batman. They figured it out, and and then they say it's only to be imposed for the regulation of commerce. That's all it was ever. They just hire these brain dead thugs to go out and assault people, and like they did with the guy that Patrick Henry witnessed when he got flogged to death for refusing to take a license. Remember, licenses and taxes work together. We're going to cover that right now. Okay, yeah, licenses and taxes work together. This is actually a U.S. Supreme Court case, license tax cases. The requirement of payment of such licenses is only a mode of imposing taxes. And so, and it's on a licensed business. Okay, so licenses and taxes are for businesses. It has nothing to do with we the people. And in fact, there's a Supreme Court case that I have in my YouTube videos. I think it's in Color of Law one that talks about income as corporate profits. The Supreme Court has said that. And so if you have income, then you're a corporation. Matter of fact, I went to the Supreme Court 3 times, and every time I filed a petition to proceed without the payment of taxes, and I told them that you don't have any right to turn this case away because I'm one of the people, and you don't have any right to charge me a tax because I'm not a corporation, I have no income, et cetera, et cetera. I get compensation for labor, but I don't have income. Anyways, and I go through all of that, and they've accepted it every time. Anyways, so a license is only a mode of enforcing the payment of taxes. The power and right of the states to tax, control, and regulate any business can carry on within its limits. So it's all about businesses, and it's all about licenses and taxes. So the only reason they give you a license is because they want a tax. They want the tax. And this is actually a Canadian court case, and it talks about it. This is basically it talks about Mark can support the existence of an implied license agreement, and its role is to gather Canadian income, report it, and pay taxes on it. Okay, so licenses and taxes work together. This is another Canadian case. Can support the existence of an implied license agreement. Evidence of control by the trademark's owner can support the existence of an implied license agreement. And then it says this to go and talk to these lawyers that specialize in tax law. A license is a contract, and A license can be express or implied. An express license is one in which the direct terms authorize the performance of a certain act, as a license to keep a tavern or a public authority. Those ones are usually in paper, in writing. An implied license is one in which, though not expressly given, may be presumed by the acts of the party having the right to give it. In other words, when you pay a filing fee, you get to proceed in their so-called court, and so it's an implied license, and they won't let you proceed unless you do pay the extortion. An excise tax is a privilege tax. An excise tax is often synonymous with a privilege or license tax. This is a Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Both of these are Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. The terms excise and privilege tax are synonymous. So, again, a license with a court filing fee is an excise tax. First, they convert your right into to file a lawsuit into a privilege, and then they excise tax it for the implied license. And then the speeding ticket is an excise tax. First, they convert your right to travel into a privilege, and then they excise tax you for the privilege of traveling over the speed limit, over the posted speed limit. And really, it's only supposed to be for corporations and fictitious entities. So speeding and those kinds of things are for truck drivers and bus drivers, those people who are engaged in commerce, and we're going to go through that here later. Customs duties are excise taxes. First, they convert your right to travel, then they excise tax you for the privilege of bringing your property into their corporation. And this is what the pigs at the border in Canada did, is they seized my truck, the truck that I was traveling in, and then they went and charged me an excise tax of $2,500 to get it back. You know, the thieves. And so that's, you don't tell me they weren't representing me. They were obviously representing me, and I had served them with notices on numerous occasions telling them they were fired, but they don't care. They got the guns. That's what they intend. That's why they want those guns, so they can shove their representation down your throat and get their buddies to shove their, you know, the RCMP pigs that I dealt with. They all have guns, and that's exactly what they intend to do, is shove their representation down their throat. And that's the reason they don't want you having guns. They don't want you to be able to defend yourself against them. They want to be able to assault you and kidnap you with much more ease. They want to be able to do it safely, and so that they can assault you and kidnap you and falsely imprison you without you defending yourself. That's exactly what it's all about. They want to make sure that you can't defend yourself, and that's what it's all about. UNIDROIT, all courts in Canada and the United States are United Nations courts under the UNIDROIT Treaty. We're going to go through that now, and have been for over 30 years. They're all de facto. They have no authority to delegate anything to the United Nations in the Constitution of the United States of America or the British North America Act. Actually, it's a bill because there's no royal assent, but actually that's exactly how a constitution would be, because it's not generated from the crown, from the government, from the crown. It comes from the people. So what happened is the people of the day went and put together a proposed constitution and sent it to the Imperial Parliament, and they basically rubber stamped it. But it doesn't have royal assent, and that means it was coming from the people, as much as the U.S. Constitution was coming from the people. And so there's no delegation of authority to the UN or UNIDROIT or any New World Order entity in either one of the U.S. Constitution or the BNA bill. UNIDROIT stands for Unification of Private Law. The website says that 63 countries have adopted it. It's designed to be automatically implemented. It even talks about municipal law, which all of these cities and stuff like that is all under municipal law. Canada and the United States have been signatories of the UNIDROIT Treaty for over 30 years. The UNIDROIT website says nothing about Texas, Arizona, or any of the American states or the Canadian provinces. Therefore, the UNIDROIT application of in America is only in federal areas. Think about it. That's exactly what's going on. It's only in federal areas. And so they send these. That's why these cops in the U.S. have to be a U.S. citizen. There's cops that start learning about these two classes of citizens, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not a U.S. citizen." They get fired so fast their head spins, and so that's why cops have to be a U.S. citizen. That's why all of this stuff that's going on is federal for sure. Yeah. Anyways, Unidroit covers negotiable instruments, civil procedures, secured transactions, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, contracts, banking law. We're going to see that in their website right now, and it covers a lot more. Now, think about it. When you go and when you're in one of their kangaroo courts, first of all, if you want to pay a filing fee, you have to do it with a negotiable instrument. They won't accept gold or silver coin. It's got to be a negotiable instrument. If you give them gold or silver coin, if they accept it, which I would be shocked if they did, but if they did, they'd convert it to IOUs. And you understand that Federal Reserve notes and Bank of Canada notes are IOUs, right? Because they're commercial paper. Think about it; they're commercial paper. And if they're commercial paper, then they can either be only one of two things. They can either be an IOU or a promissory note. That's it. And a promissory note has to have a promise to pay, and there's no promise to pay on those things, and so therefore they're an IOU. Anyways, so when you're in their kangaroo courts, they only accept negotiable instruments. It falls under the rules of civil procedure. A lot of times they do secured transactions. They do bonds. They do a bid bond, performance bond, and a payment bond. That's how they get you into the jail. The legal status of women. You know, at common law, the wife is the property of the husband, and so the women and the children are protected. They have to deal with the husband, and that was a major protection. But under Unidroit, they said that the courts have to recognize women, and so now you see all these women. They have whole jails that are for women, and when at common law that would never happen. So you know, you have these women's libbers. I mean, they're getting their just reward. Anyways, maintenance obligations, contracts, anything to do with a contract. When you pay a filing fee, that's a contract. Okay, that's exactly what it is. That's why they want you to pay it. They want that contract. They want that. They got to pay their errors and omissions insurance. That's exactly what it is. Banking law. That's Unidroit covers that. And so, anyways, this is the first page of this particular part of that Unidroit website. Now, it's kind of hard to see, so let's get closer. And it talks about commercial contracts, cultural property, franchising. And then we'll go to the second page, and there's a lot more stuff on the second page. Talks about leasing, security interests, talks about transport, talks about banking law, capital markets, civil liability, talks about contracts in general, cultural property, franchising, hotel keepers, insurance, intellectual property, leasing. I mean, this covers a lot of stuff, and if you're involved in any of it, it falls under Unidroit, under the federal jurisdiction and the UN. And legal status of women, maintenance obligations, movement of persons. Okay. You know, when you get on the airline, why do you think they spell your name in all block capital letters on an airline ticket? Negotiable instruments. Unidroit covers mandatory insurance for motor vehicles, anything related to marriage, divorce, or children. I mean, you know, so they cover insurance and then they want to make it mandatory. I mean, of course, that's exactly what they want to do. They're a bunch of thieves. So they go and regulate this insurance and then they make it mandatory. And actually, this is another part of the Unidroit website. It has some lists of a few treaties, and here's some of them. It's a 1955 Benelux Treaty on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles, and 1958 Convention concerning the recognition and enforcement of decisions relating to maintenance obligations towards children. and 1959 European Convention on Compulsory Insurance Against Civil Liability in respect of motor vehicles, and because this is all federal, then the federal statutes apply, and federal statutes in the criminal code, Title 18, United States Code, Section 31, even defines a motor vehicle, and yet these hired thugs are going out assaulting you for commercial crimes. It says Title 18 United States Code Section 31 says a motor vehicle means every description or carriage or other contrivance propelled or drawn by mechanical power and used for commercial purposes on the highways and the transportation of passengers or property. And it even defines what commercial purposes is, and again, it's carrying passengers or property for hire. And if you're not doing that, then you don't have a motor vehicle. And yet these hired thugs go out and assault you if you don't have one of their license plates on your vehicle. And even if you do, if you're not carrying passengers or property, then you don't have a motor vehicle. And that's why, you got to watch the video on peace officers, because it goes through the difference between a peace officer and a law enforcement officer, and we need to educate ourselves, and we need to start bringing actions against these crooks, because they have no authority whatsoever. They're just a bunch of thieves and pirates. Unidroit. Canada and the United States are signatories to the Unidroit Treaty. According to the website, there's 63 countries. This is actually from the website about membership. It shows Australia, Canada, and it shows some countries over in Europe and South America. It also shows Russia. Also shows the United States, Great Britain, and more countries in Europe and South America. I didn't. I only was interested in Canada and United States, and it shows it. Anyways, it doesn't list Texas. Unidroit does not say anything about Texas or Arizona. No American state. Alberta's not listed. British Columbia's not listed. Ontario. No Canadian province. Therefore, anything involving motor vehicles or the courts and is both commercial and federal, and therefore by consent. Now, if you think about it, Ontario is a really good example. If the Queen has a crown, if it's the Queen's crown, it'll have ER superimposed over it, which means Elizabeth Regina, and yet the crown in Ontario does not have anything like that, and that means that that it's the UN, it's the Vatican is where it really is. It's the Vatican, because if you go through my presentation on attorneys, then I go through and show how all bar members are foreign agents of the Vatican. The Vatican owns the City of London, which is the downtown 1-2 square miles. I'm not sure how big it is, but it has the Parliament buildings. It's got a wall around it. And when the Queen, when they convene the Imperial Parliament, the Queen goes there, and she goes to a gate. There's 12 gates in that downtown area of London. Called one of them is called Temple Bar, and it's basically a big oak door. She goes to that gate. She beats on it with her scepter. The Lord Mayor of London's on the other side. He opens up. There's a little 1 square foot hole, little door and a big door, and he says, "What do you want?" to the Queen of England, and she says she has to get his permission to enter in there. And what they do is they leave a hostage in exchange for the Queen, so that the Queen, they'll let the Queen go in exchange for the hostage when she comes back out, because that's foreign territory. She walks 2 steps behind the Lord Mayor of London the whole trip, but she's in there, and it's foreign territory. Anyways, anything in America, Canada, United States is and federal or state, doesn't matter, involving motor vehicles or the courts or the banks or finance falls under Unidroit. And you saw the list. You ought to go to the website and look at that stuff, because there's a bunch of stuff that's covered under Unidroit, and that's the New World Order coming in full blossom, and you're seeing it every day on national TV, where you got the cops beating up some guy because he's jaywalking, and Constitution's a trust indenture. There's some basic principles of the law. Okay, any constitution is a trust indenture, and why do you think that they make it a crime to commit breach of trust? I mean, hello. Anyways, this is a U.S. Supreme Court case. The governments are but trustees acting under derived authority and have no power to delegate what is not delegated to them, but the people as the original fountain might take away what they have delegated and entrust to whom they please. And so the important thing here is the Constitution is a trust indenture, and it's delegated authority, okay? The Constitution says absolutely nothing about a corporation. A trust is something completely different than a corporation. Trust is common law, and trusts have been around. Trust can't be regulated by the government, quite frankly. So the Constitution sets up a trust. It doesn't set up a corporation, and yet this is what you see all over the place: is these corporations. And so the Constitution's a trust indenture. Another court case. This is another U.S. Supreme Court case. There's no such thing as power inherent sovereignty in the government of the United States. In this country, sovereignty resides in the people, and Congress can exercise no power which they have not by their Constitution entrusted to it. Operative word, entrusted. And so then if they have delegated authority, it's important to know that the delegate cannot delegate. And these are maxims of law. This is so old and well established that everybody knows. A delegate cannot delegate. An agent cannot delegate his functions to a subagent without the knowledge or consent of the principal. The person to whom an office or duty is delegated cannot lawfully devolve the duty on another unless he be expressly authorized to do so. Okay, there's got to be something in there saying yes, you can. It's got to be expressed. In other words, it's got to be named. It's got to be expressly authorized to do so. A delegated power cannot again be delegated, or a deputy cannot have or appoint a deputy. And so this is very important because there's no delegated authority for a corporation called United States. There's nothing in the Constitution of the United States of America that says anything about setting up a corporation, and or any agencies. And yet, if you look at Title 28, United States Code, Section 3002, which is it says in this chapter, United States means a federal corporation. And then it also means an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of this federal corporation, or an instrumentality of the federal corporation. And so when they're talking United States, they're talking about a federal corporation. If they want to know if you're a citizen of the United States, they want to know if you're a citizen of this federal corporation. They're trying to, if you're a citizen of this federal corporation, then you're a corporation too. That's exactly what they're doing, is they're fabricating evidence. And they want to make sure that you're one of their slaves, so then you don't have any rights and they can do whatever they want. And that's exactly what's going on. And there's no delegated authority for this federal corporation, and it's completely ultra vires and unconstitutional. And we're going to go through that. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called the Federal Bureau of Investigation. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called the National Security Agency. There's no delegation of authority for Central Intelligence Agency. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Department of Homeland Security. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Internal Revenue Service. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Department of the Treasury. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called, an agency, I should say, called the Office of Attorney General of the United States, which is actually just another corporation. There's no delegation of authority for a municipal corporation called the City of Fort Worth. Any of these municipal corporations. There's no delegation of authority for a municipal corporation called the City of Grand Prairie. There's no delegation of authority for any municipal corporation. There's no delegation of authority for any prison corporation. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Department of Public Safety. You know, you think about it, what they did is they wrote the federal Constitution, and the federal Constitution actually does talk about the states. So the states have a right to set up a constitution, but that state constitution has to be within the parameters of the federal Constitution. And so the federal Constitution does not talk about any departments of public safety in the states. It doesn't talk about Texas State Police or any state police. So therefore, there's no delegation of authority for any of those corporations either. And so there's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Department of Public Safety in any state. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Texas State Police. or state police in any state. And in fact, there's actually federal statutes that say that in order for something to be admissible as evidence in court, it has to have a corporate seal on it. Right? If it's from the government, okay. So in other words, the government, it's got to have a corporate seal, which I haven't seen anything that has a corporate seal. The Texas driver's license has a hologram, but you can't see a hologram. That's just and so that's not intended to prove that still wouldn't be admissible as evidence in any court. And so what they do is they want evidence, they want hearsay evidence that's inadmissible as evidence in any court, so that they can use it to build a case against you. And there's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Canada. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Canada Border Services Agency. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Lethbridge Correctional Center. There's no delegation of authority for a corporation called Calgary Remand Center. You know, when I was in their jail in Canada, it was the Lethbridge Correctional Center, and they went and charged me for not working, and because I told them, I says, I'm not going to do your slave labor scam, but I get 80 bucks an hour, so if you want to come to some agreement for compensation for labor, I'll certainly, I'm not refusing to work, I'm just refusing to work for your slave labor scam. And anyways, they went and charged me in one of their kangaroo courts and for refusing to work. And so then I appealed it. And according to the appeal, they're supposed to answer the appeal in a week. Well, I appealed it, and my arguments for the appeal is that there's no delegation of authority for a corporation called the Lethbridge Correctional Center. Therefore, that's an unconstitutional delegation of authority, and you don't have any authority to do anything. So by the time I got out of there, they were glad to get me out of there, because by the time I got out of there, they still hadn't answered it, and that was like 4 weeks later. So, and I haven't heard a peep out of them, eh? So they don't want to talk about that. It was just a kangaroo court. That's just more evidence that it was just a kangaroo court. There's no delegation of authority in Canada or the United States to delegate any power to the United Nations or any United Nations agency. All so-called courts in Canada and United States and in many countries are United Nations courts, are de facto, are thieves, are pigs, pirates, and in some cases are murderers. I mean, they don't put people to death in Canada, but they certainly do in the United States. And it's all United Nations, and they're UN courts, they're de facto courts. They don't have any authority. Ultra vires, this is taken from Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition, page 1522. Ultra vires, an act performed without any authority to act on the subject. The term has a broad application, but includes not only acts prohibited by the Charter, but acts which are in excess of powers granted. Act is ultra vires when a corporation is without authority to perform it under any circumstances or for any purpose. Ultra vires act of municipality is one which is beyond powers conferred upon it by law. See, this is all municipal law. It's exactly what it is, and it's ultra vires. It's an unconstitutional act. They don't have any authority. And in Canada, they actually passed a section in the criminal code, which, you know, it'd be interesting to get the original bill and read it, because it'd be interesting to see what it says, because this has got a lot of lawyer smithing in it, a lot of word smithing that these liars do. Anyways, talks about de facto law. Obedience to de facto law. No person shall be convicted of an offense in respect of an act or omission in obedience to the laws for the time being made and enforced by persons in de facto possession of the sovereign power in and over the place where the act or omission occurs. And that's section 15 of the Criminal Code of Canada. And so that kangaroo court was a de facto court. The Canada Border Services Agency was de facto. You know, none of that should ever happen, and they can't convict me. That's the reason they wanted me to sign their order, and I refused to sign that too. And so they got nothing. I didn't sign anything. Anything I did sign, I signed without prejudice, all rights reserved, no assured value, no liability. I was planning on suing them, but I'm going to have to wait a while. I'll do a collateral attack, once there's regime change and with the pigs in Canada, because they're just a bunch of pigs, and it goes all the way to the top, and so. Once there's a regime change, I'll bring a collateral attack, and I can bring a collateral attack because we're going to go through void judgments here, and we'll talk about that because it's a void judgment, and I can attack it collaterally at any time and any place forever. Um, anyways, and then plus, what I want to do is bring it before a jury of my peers. I want to see somebody hang over this. I think that there should be some people getting hung. And of course, I wouldn't want to do it myself. I don't want to accept responsibility for that. I'd never take the law into my own hands because that would defeat the purpose. I'm trying to make it better for everybody here, and so that would defeat the purpose. Um, anyways, when any corporation goes bankrupt, the creditors become the owners, and it is a coup d'etat for the government, except they don't tell you. And an example of a corporation that went bankrupt recently is American Airlines. And this is actually taken from Yahoo Canada Finance. And this is an article that talks about our AMR creditors prefer all-stock merger with U.S. Airways. So this is U.S. Airways and American Airlines merger. And on the bottom of the first page, it says, as the new owners of a significant percentage of the restructured airline, it's APA's responsibility, and APA stands for Airline Allied Pilots Association. So that was the union for American Airlines, and they had American Airlines owed them a bunch of money, and so they became one of the owners, right? Because they were a creditor. And so let's go on. The next slide, which is page 2 of that article, it says under U.S. Airways proposal sent in November, AMR creditors would own 70% and U.S. Airways shareholders 30%. Right? See what I'm talking about? So AMR creditors would be the owners. They owned the bankrupt AMR Airlines, and so then the merged airline, they would own 70% of the merged airline because U.S. Airways shareholders were owners of U.S. Airways, and so they would own a percentage of the merged airline as well. And so there's absolutely no delegated authority. It's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9, 1933, being declared bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June 5, 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States, the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. And that's taken from the United States Congressional Record, March 17, 1993, volume 33. So the United States is bankrupt another time, and Canada's bankrupt. If you look on this next slide, the Receiver General, this is an application for a SIN card, Social Insurance Number, and it says that if you are replacing the card, you got to pay $10, and you got to make the check payable to the Receiver General for Canada. Okay, so that's a receiver in bankruptcy. Hello. Bankruptcy, these United Nations bankster thieves make all the rules, insurance, negotiable instruments, banking, etc. These United Nations bankster thieves make it all mandatory so they can create a fictitious debt. By fraud, these United Nations bankster thieves create a cestui trust in the name of every living soul when they're given birth to be used to finance their fictitious debt and to facilitate the slavery or bondage of we the people. The United Nations bankster thieves then seize the corporation when it inevitably goes bankrupt and thereby create their worldwide dictatorship. These United Nations bankster thieves get their whore buddies in the bankrupt legislatures and parliaments, sold themselves, and they're whores because they sold themselves to the bankster thieves. they get these whore buddies to hire low intelligence pigs to populate border crossings so they can assault people, kidnap people, and falsely imprison people to create business for their so-called courts, to generate business for their bankster-owned and operated prisons, and to generate revenue to support the fictitious debt. I mean, this is a real money-making scam, this is. These same United Nations bankster thieves create a fictitious war on drugs and a war on illegal immigration and a war on terror and a war on anything else they can think of, all of which is really wars on we the people to justify their hired thugs at the border, to further make business for their kangaroo so-called courts, and to make business for their bankster-owned and operated prisons. You know, this is just a real money-making scam. These de facto kangaroo United Nations courts make sure that they can get a conviction so they can make business for their bankster-owned and operated de facto prisons. These de facto kangaroo United Nations so-called courts have a conviction rate that is over 97%, and if you do not plea bargain it, they throw the book at you just like they did to me. They want a plea bargain because that's not subject to appeal. Okay, once you plea bargain it, that's done. It's a done deal, and it's just nothing more than a commercial transaction. Everything's negotiable, and so that's what's going on, boys and girls. And
Okay, moving on. Courts have given themselves qualified immunity. Qualified immunity defense fails if the public officer violates clearly established right because of a regionally competent official should know the law governing his conduct. And the idea of qualified immunity is that they can. It's called presumption. They can presume certain set of facts until you defeat them, and that's the purpose of my letters that I send out, my registered mail to these judges and stuff. And that's why that Redmond the whore doesn't want me to send that stuff out, because they want to be able to maintain their presumptions. Anyways, okay, so the next one is a plaintiff who seeks damages for violations of a constitutional right or statutory rights may overcome defendant's official qualified immunity by showing that those rights were clearly established at the time of the conduct at issue. Qualified immunity protects government officials from liability from civil damages insofar as their conduct does not violate clearly established statutory or constitutional rights which a reasonable person would have known. At common law, there's no judicial immunity. That's the reason they wanted to give themselves some immunity there, because they knew that they're a bunch of thieves and pirates and criminals, and they want to be able to get away with it. And so I'm looking forward to convening some common law juries here, because I think that we need to hold some of these criminals accountable. And, you know, there's going to be some opposition, I guarantee you. Officers of the court have no immunity when violating a constitutional right, for they are deemed to know the law. An officer who acts in violation of the Constitution ceases to represent the government. Ignorance of the law does not excuse misconduct in anyone, least of all a sworn officer of the law. Now, this is important to understand, because this applies to all officers of the government, including the judicial whores. And what happens is that there's some good examples in history, and if you watch my peace officers video, I talk about some of those examples. For example, the Nazis in the Second World War, they all claimed, oh, we were following orders. Well, that got them absolutely nowhere. They all suffered death by hanging, or the ones that didn't suffer death by hanging spent the rest of their life in jail, and some of them are even hunted to this day. These are basically the order takers, the ones that are too stupid to figure out that this is an unlawful command, and can't figure out that they shouldn't be doing this. And so they immediately cease to represent the government, and they're on their own. And so, but you still have to bring the action against them, and you still got to deal with all these judicial whores that are busy trying to cover it up and everything. Anyways, governments descend to the level of a mere private corporation and take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen, where private corporate commercial paper, securities, in other words, Federal Reserve notes and bank notes and that kind of stuff is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. Governments lose their immunity and descend to the level of private corporations when involved in commercial activity, enforcing negotiable instruments, as in fines, penalties, assessments, bails, taxes. Remedy lies in the hands of the state and its municipalities seeking remedy. So, again, If they're demanding IOUs from you, then they're commercial and they don't have any immunity. Um, these so-called judges have been given immunity by statutes, and also this qualified immunity that you see that the court cases that we talked about. Prior to 1900, they used to hang judges on a regular basis, and we need to get back to that, quite frankly. I'd really like to see that. Redmond has no immunity, but his buddies Rook, Whitman, Tillman, Langston, Athel, Battenberg, Johnston, Harper, and that are all pigs, will make sure that any lawsuit goes nowhere. A judge loses his absolute immunity from damage actions only when he acts in clear absence of all jurisdiction and performance of an act which is not judicial of in nature. Gee, that sounds like a clerk. When enforcing mere statutes, judges of all courts do not act judicially and thus are not protected by qualified and limited immunity. So he doesn't have a shred of immunity. And Redmond, I hope you listen to this, because Judgment Day's coming. Be watching your back, Redmond, because one of these days I'm going to be there. In my case, the Canada Border Services Agency pigs was prejudged from the beginning, and I even got to the border by the judicial pigs. Before I even got to the border, it was prejudged by the pigs Rook, Tillman, Matchett, Redmond, working for the de facto United Nations so-called court. It was a summary trial, a kangaroo court, in which I was denied my right to a trial by a jury of my peers under the UN rules of procedure, which are designed to deny real justice. That's exactly the purpose of them. They don't interested in justice. They want to complete that commercial transaction and make more business for their so-called courts. It's all about the money. A kangaroo court's a self-appointed tribunal or mock court in which the principles of law and justice are disregarded, perverted, and parodied. A court or tribunal characterized by unauthorized or irregular procedures, especially so as to render a fair proceeding impossible. A sham legal proceeding. Kangaroo court's a descriptive term of a sham legal proceeding in which a person's rights are totally disregarded, in which the result is a foregone conclusion because of the bias of the court or other tribunal. I offered to plead guilty. With their crown whore Bernard, I went and sent. First of all, he offered a $10,000 fine to make this all go away, and so that was a plea bargain. So I went and did a counter offer, and I said I'll plead guilty if you send me an affidavit that says that I'm a person as defined by your statute, that your statute was properly approved and adopted and applies to me. But nothing ever happened. They didn't want to do something like that. He wouldn't want to perjure himself. These judicial pigs intend to deny me due process. I was denied due process from the beginning. And all of this is going to be in that Canada Border Pigs video that's upcoming. This was all under instructions from Elizabeth the Pig, Johnson the Pig, Athel the Pig, Harper the Pig, and others. Neither Redmond nor the Canada Border Pigs had any jurisdiction. When there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing, such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. Redmond intends to represent me without authority, intends that all his judicial whore buddies represent me without authority, which is why he ordered me not to post any more letters. Redmond was not neutral or detached. It's a fundamental right of a party to have a neutral and detached judge preside over the judicial proceedings. Well, it wasn't even a judicial proceeding. It was a kangaroo court. Redmond was a clerk. It was a show trial. Canada Border Services Agency pigs made a void judgment, and then Redmond made a void judgment. A void judgment is one which is of no legal force or effect whatever. It's an absolute nullity. Its invalidity may be asserted by any person whose rights or effects are affected at any time and any place, and need not be attacked directly, but may be attacked collaterally whenever and wherever it is interposed. A void order may be attacked either directly or collaterally at any time. A void judgment is one which from its inception is and forever continues to be absolutely null, without legal efficacy, ineffectual to bind parties or to support a right of no legal force or effect whatever, incapable of enforcement in any manner and to any degree. A void order, this is actually some English cases. A void order results from a fundamental defect in proceedings or from a without jurisdiction ultra vires act of a public body or judicial office holder, and that's exactly what Redmond is. He wasn't even a judge. Without jurisdiction ultra vires act is any act which a court did not have power to do. A void order is incurably void, and all proceedings based on the invalid claim or void act are also void, even a decision of a higher court. Court of Appeal or Supreme Court will be void if the decision is founded on an invalid claim or void act, because something cannot be founded on nothing. Based on a void judgment, the RCMP pigs arrested me, which is false arrest, and then falsely imprisoned me in their Calgary Remand Center and their Lethbridge Correctional Center for 82 days. There's no way that I will ever see justice at the hands of these Vatican Jesuit whores like Redmond the pig, Rook the pig, Whitman the pig, Tillman the pig, which is what all these pigs intend. And Elizabeth the bitch, no disrespect to dogs intended. Rook the pig defamed me and slandered me when he accused me of being a paper terrorist in his Meads versus Meads divorce decision. And think about it. Rook the pig was operating as a clerk because he was enforcing a statute, the Divorce Act, after being hired by Meads when they filed for permission to divorce. Think about it. That's exactly what a filing is in a divorce. It's trying to get permission to divorce. And so then you got this whore by the name of Rook that's a clerk under the Divorce Act. And so Rook the pig knows that divorce falls under the United Nations under UNIDROIT. Rook the pig knows that he represented me without authority, as evidenced in the upcoming Canada Border Pigs video when he accused me of being a paper terrorist. His decision in Meads versus Meads, which is actually slander and defamation, and that's exactly what he intended. Quite frankly, I find that the accusation of being a paper terrorist is quite flattering, but realistically not true, because if I was able to terrorize a bureaucrat into doing something contrary to his oath of office, the bureaucrat would be guilty of breach of trust. The simple fact of the matter is that if the bureaucrat changes his behavior because of something I've done, it is because I've shown him that he's being given unlawful commands and he realizes he has no duty to obey an unlawful command. But Rook doesn't want to admit that. He wants to go and throw this terrorist word around, and actually he's the one that's the terrorist. Rook, the Associate Chief Judicial whore, intends to represent me without authority. I fired him on numerous occasions, and I can prove it, and he intends to breach the trust. Rook is using a case which he was not a judge. He was a clerk. And he intends to use it to deny due process to anybody, and that's found in this. Rook intends to deny due process with his master order for organized pseudo-legal commercial argument documents, dated 18th June 2013, pursuant to Meads versus Meads. And here's the front page. And let's look at it a little closer. See there? It's got master order for organized pseudo-legal commercial arguments. And then it's upon the court's motion. See, nobody asked him to do it. He went ahead and did it at his own free will and choice, okay? So he is big time whore. And Honorable Associate Chief Justice J.D. Rook, what a joke. He is a whore. He ought to swing. He deserves to hang. And I am looking forward to seeing it, and I'm going to see him rot in hell no matter what. It says here, upon the court's own motion and upon its hearing that there are from time to time attempts to file documents within the court that are in form not known to the court and are intended to be an abuse of court process, frivolous and vexatious. Yeah, you bet it's frivolous and vexatious, because you guys are a bunch of thieves and pirates and you don't want your crimes exposed. It is hereby ordered the clerk shall review the documents proposed to be filed by any suspected OPCA litigant to determine if any formal defects appear. And Tillman was busy trumpeting the party line when he was in his kangaroo court when I tried to do that motion for an order of prohibition, and he was smearing me with this OPCA slander all throughout his decisions, and those are published now. And so Tillman's just is Rook's bum boy, his bum buddy, and just doing what his handler is telling him to do. If such documents contain any formal defects as set out in List A, the clerk shall refuse to file the documents with the court. And there's Rook's signature, the whore. Anyways, and here's the list. The litigant claims a specific title or status, a flesh and blood man. They don't want any flesh and blood men. They don't want any freemen on the land. They want slaves, and the only thing they deal with is slaves, because they're a bunch of thieves and pirates. Oh, and it's also you can't put a colon in your name. You can't claim to be a House of Fern, like which is what I do, or a lot of people claim family of or clan of. They don't want any common law in there. They're a bunch of thieves and pirates. That's all common law. The Queen's name, the Queen, she's the House of Windsor because Prince Philip, his family name, actually he's Mountbatten, but she's House of Windsor, and and but her name, so she could use Windsor or Mountbatten, but actually it's Battenberg because she's German. Anyways, but they don't want any common law in there. They're a bunch of pirates and thieves. Anyways, Rook intends to make war on anyone who considers themselves a living soul or a freeman on the land or a freeman. It's tyrants like Rook that precipitated the War of Independence when they flogged a man to death for refusing to take a license, which after having witnessed it, Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. It is tyrants like Rook that precipitated the Magna Carta. It's tyrants like Rook that precipitated the Confirmio Chartarum. I mean, it's happened probably half a dozen different times. There's the English Civil War. There's Oliver Cromwell. There's the Glorious Revolution. There's all of these things that are happened because these tyrants emerge from time to time like Rook and try and enslave the people. I think that we just ought to just start hanging them. Anyways, Freeman, this is a site out of Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Freeman, a person who possesses and enjoys all civil and political rights belonging to the people under a free government. We don't want any of that. A person who's not a slave. And Rook doesn't want any of that. A freeman is a distinction from a freeman from a vassal. This is a William Law Dictionary, 1816. Freeman, this is Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. In the Roman law, it denoted one who was either born free or emancipated and was opposite of a slave. That's where Rook wants. He wants his slaves. Yeah, the Rook, the pig. Anyways, if the Queen does not have a lawful valid oath of office, then nobody has a lawful valid current oath of office, and they are nothing but pirates and thieves. And it would make sense that they would not if they know that they would that they have no lawful valid current oath, that they would want to keep it a secret by hiding the evidence. And I'm going to show you how that's exactly what they're doing in this criminal corporation called Canada. This is actually an email that I sent to the Department of So-Called Justice in Alberta because I was having trouble getting copies of oaths of office, and so I sent them an email and I asked them that there's statutes that require oaths, and so I'd like to get a copy of some oaths. And they came back and they said the oaths of members of judiciary are not public documents, and so they're basically telling me that they're not available. And Battenberg has no lawful oath because she was not coronated on the true stone of destiny, and there's a website that you can find it. And there's a John Anthony Hill case that brought it up in a criminal case where they were doing one of their kangaroo courts over in England, and so he went and brought up the stone of destiny, and brought up the fact that she perjured her oath, and that she didn't have a valid oath and she wasn't a valid monarch. And the court said it's immaterial. And so what that's telling you, think about it. The court said it's immaterial. That means that it doesn't matter. That means that it's not a real court. That's what it means. It's a kangaroo court. It's immaterial. That's the only time that wouldn't matter is because the court, in order for him to have a valid oath, that his oath flows from the Queen, and so it's immaterial. That's because it's not a real court. And this is actually the web page. It says UK landmark case could stymie the legal system. Queen not a valid monarch. Breaking news. And this is actually blown up. It says this is the John Anthony Hill case. And look at the scowl she has, eh? I bet she's pleased. Anyways, here's Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2. It says, all oaths must be lawful, allowed by common law or some statute if they're administered by persons in their private capacity or not duly authorized. They are quorum non judice and void. And so what they're saying, if the oath isn't properly done, and if the Queen doesn't have a valid oath, then nobody else has a valid oath. So then they're all operating in their private capacity, and so then there's no oaths. And that goes to Canada, that goes to England. They're just nothing but a bunch of thieves and pirates. When I went into the show trial, I asked the judge for his name so I had a pen so I could write it down, and the coward refused to give it. I turned out later his name was D.G. Redmond, and I'd served him with a notice and demand, which he refused because the reason he refused the notice and demand is because he intended to keep his presumption, and because the case was prejudged from the beginning in his kangaroo court. Under directions from Matchett, the chief judge, Le Grand Juror, the associate chief judge, Redmond's buddy Hironaka, in conspiracy with Bernard, the Vatican Crown bar member pig, entered a plea for me without my consent so they could proceed with their show trial and their kangaroo court and their denial of due process and justify the assaults of their border pig buddies and their kidnappings and their false imprisonment. Judgment Day's coming, boys. You know, anyways, not every action by any judge is an exercise of his judicial function. It is not a judicial function for a judge to commit an intentional tort, even though the tort occurs in the courthouse. When the judge acts as a trespasser of the law, when the judge does not follow the law, the judge loses subject matter jurisdiction, and the judge's orders are void and of no legal force or effect. Brutum fulmen, taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. An empty noise, an empty threat, a judgment void on its face, which has no legal effect and no judgment at all, by which no rights are divested and from which none can be obtained, neither binds nor bars anyone. And so Redmond's issuing some brutum fulmen. Rook the pig knows he's he's the real terrorist, and this is taken from Funk and Wagnall's New Standard Dictionary, 1946. Terrorism, a system of government that seeks to rule by intimidation. So Rook is the real terrorist, Rook the pig. There's a YouTube profile called Servant King, and Servant King explains how a court case is a satanic religious ceremony. Servant King explains how it's witchcraft, and so then if you think about it, they're all Baal priests. There's a friend of mine that happens to be Catholic, and he goes and he's always railing on him about being Baal priests and all the rest of it. And so this is coming from several people. There's YouTube videos that go through and explain all this stuff. Anyways, there's a guy by the name of Mark Passio who's a former satanic Satanist priest, and he talks about the pillars of Satanism, and he's got some good videos. The guy's brilliant. He had to learn Latin in high school, and so he goes through natural law, what natural law is, and he's brilliant. He talks about the pillars of Satanism. Survival is the highest law of Satanism. Moral relativism, no such thing as right or wrong. We just make up what's right or wrong, and it could be different tomorrow. Social Darwinism. Certain classes of society think they're most fit to rule, and that's going on today big time with all of these elites, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers and all of these people that seem to think that they can do anything they want and hire these judges. You know, the Canadian justice system is the best justice system money can buy. They're all for sale, and it's the best justice system money can buy. Pillars of Satanism, eugenics, elite get to determine who lives and dies, order followers responsible for all the atrocities in history, just follow orders without thinking about whether it's lawful order or not, willing slaves. I go through this extensively in my peace officers video, and so I would encourage you to watch that. Moral relativism, 2/3 of people believe in moral relativism. Truth is relative, and it can change tomorrow. And this is all coming from the Vatican. Corruption in the courts. 4 talks more about pretended legislation. And this is a cite from Jacob A. New Law Dictionary, 1750 edition. Jesuits, etc., born in the king's dominions and ordained by the pretended jurisdiction of Rome. Okay, so all of this stuff is coming from the Vatican, and I have many wonderful friends who happen to be Catholic. In many ways, the Catholic people are victims of the satanic Vatican as much as everybody else. History is riddled with examples of the Vatican murdering whole communities for heresy, which is defined as any belief that they do not endorse, and so it's heresies whatever they decide today, and there's many of my friends that are Catholic that happen to be telling me about this stuff. Psychiatric institutions have been routinely used by corrupt regimes as a means of political suppression for decades. Courts in Canada routinely order a psychiatric examination, and they did in my case. My brother was ordered into a mental hospital for 30 days because he did not trumpet their party line. My brother's wife was told by the shrink that if my brother did not take a driver's license, the shrink would declare my brother insane, and my brother would be permanently locked up in a mental hospital. Patrick Henry coined the phrase, "Give me liberty or give me death." This slogan was developed when Patrick Henry witnessed someone being flogged to death for refusing to take a license. The thief makes a legal determination and then represents you because not everybody's a taxpayer, and then they flogged the guy to death because he didn't want to. He wasn't a person that was required to take the license, and he didn't want to enter into that contract. And so that's the price. That's what these criminals, these thieves, these murderers do. So this is the beginning of my Fire the Whores campaign, eh? And the motivation of the de facto so-called justice is not for judges is not for justice. It's for the appearance of justice. And this is covered extensively in Corruption in the Courts, number 4. They are not competent to do justice. The absolute best that they could ever do is the appearance of justice. And so we have to understand that they intend to create business for their so-called court to justify their existence, to create work for their buddies, to collect more royalties, to get promoted to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. They create work for their buddies by making decisions as cryptic as possible, by forcing the issue to another hearing, by ignoring the law and thereby forcing an appeal. They do this stuff all the time, and they don't care. Once you turn it into a commercial transaction, they don't care. They've given themselves immunity. It doesn't matter. And so we need to start hanging some of them. What do you find? Do you want to place your future in the hands of a United Nations whore who sits on the bench and wants to play stupid? That's exactly what they do. They sit there and they play stupid. Do you want to put the future of your wife and children in the hands of one of these judicial whores that have complete immunity no matter what? Because if you sue one of them, you have to get one of their whore buddies to do it. Sure, some of them really do want to do justice. There's no doubt about it. I don't dispute that at all. Some of them are good and honorable people that want to try and do the right thing. And there's no doubt about it. But are you going to take the chance that that's the one that you got? Do you want to place your future in the hands of the whore that's bought and paid for by these crown pigs? Do you want to place yourself in the hands of a judicial whore that's intent on converting you into a ward of the court? You want to take that chance? Do you consider yourself a Christian? Do you want to try to follow the golden rule? Do you treat others the way you want to be treated? Do you think that you will get any sympathy from God on Judgment Day when you have not done everything you can to put a stop to these satanic judicial whores selling their justice? There's such a thing as karma. I think everybody talks about it. Karma is the universal principle that says what goes around comes around. And if we knowingly allow these judicial whores to victimize tens of thousands of the people in the name of their satanic religious ceremonies, don't you think that we will be held accountable? Don't you think it will come back around at us? I mean, the prisons are full of people that are in there for victimless crimes. Don't you think it's already coming back around at us every day when they sell us their justice in their de facto so-called courts, when their revenue officers masquerading as police officers unlawfully arrest us for commercial crimes like speeding, when they deny us due process based on one of their fictitious quasi-contracts, when they populate their prisons with victimless crimes? All judges are foreign agents of the Vatican, and if you have any doubt of that, look at my presentation on attorneys, and I'm gonna actually do a special one upcoming too, because the rest of them, they're out there on YouTube, but they're mixed in these private information shares that were done in these various locations. This idea of separation in church and state was really about taking Christianity out of government and displacing it with satanic Roman civil law from the Vatican. All of these so-called court cases are actually satanic religious ceremonies by priests of Baal. Under the guise of the separation of church and state, they've taken the Lord's Prayer out of the schools, taken Christian symbols out of the courts, taken Christian symbols out of the schools. They've converted our Christian government into satanic government. It's all been done by court rulings from these priests of Baal masquerading as judges. At common law, the jury has to be your peers. At common law, the jury calls the witnesses, questions the witnesses, determines the law and the facts in the matter, and even pronounces sentence if necessary. At common law, the jury can disregard the law. That's called jury nullification. Look it up on the internet. At common law, the jury can do literally anything it wants. At common law, there are no prisons. That's why common law is so severe. At common law, all prisons are commercial. Most of the people in prison are there for victimless crimes. We need to fire the whores and end the tyranny of these de facto United Nations courts and their Vatican judicial whores selling their justice. Our court is only a jury of our peers, and we are all being denied it so these judicial whores can populate their prisons and collect their royalties. When governments collapse in countries like Libya, for the first thing that happens is they kick all the prisoners out of the jails. All jails are commercial. As for me, my conscience is clear. These pigs should have murdered me when they had the chance, because by the time I'm finished with them, they will wish they had murdered me, and I will do it all within the law. Judgment Day is coming, pigs, and I'll be there demanding justice. I intend to see them all in hell. If I am really lucky, I'll get to see some of them do that little dance they do at the end of a common law rope. But I would never do it myself. I would not deny them justice, even though they've denied me justice, because then I'd be worse than they are. We all need to work together to bring these whores to justice. I would like to see some of these whores do that little dance they do at the end of a common law rope. And I am glad that it's up to a jury of my peers and not to me. Anyways, there's some upcoming events that are going to be coming up. There's Canada Border Pigs. That's another video that I'm preparing. Corruption in the Courts 4, Fire the Whores in Texas, City of Fort Worth Pigs, and the City of Grand Prairie Pigs. And those are the ones that are currently upcoming. Also, copies of these documents can be found at my private Yahoo group called Administrating Your Public Servants. I have YouTube videos. If you're watching this, you already know it, my YouTube profile, or you can send me an email for copies of documents to Engineer Win. I have a Facebook group also called Sovereignty International. And so thanks for listening today. I hope you got something out of it. And remember, knowledge is power, and there's a fundamental rule of common law: if you don't assert your rights, you lose them. And have a great day.